She wore a borrowed dress to a party she didn't belong at. Desperation dressed as confidence. Then he noticed her. Ashton Brandon. Mafia boss. Predator in a perfect suit. He saw through every lie in 30 seconds flat. Her borrowed shoes. Her empty bank account. The terror she was hiding behind red lipstick. Most men would have walked away. He made her an offer instead. "You belong to me now," he said like he was signing a death warrant. "My world. My rules. My possession." She should have run. She signed the papers anyway. And that's when everything went wrong. Hey everyone. Welcome back. I'm so grateful you're here with us again. Drop a comment and let us know where in the world you're tuning in from and what time it is there. We love connecting with our global family. The Peninsula Hotel's ballroom glittered like a jewelry box designed by someone who'd never worried about rent. Belinda Clark stood just inside the entrance, her fingers death-gripping a clutch that cost less than the champagne flute being casually abandoned on a nearby table. Breathe. You belong here. You absolutely belong here. The lie tasted expensive on her tongue. The dress, a midnight blue Valentino that her roommate's sister had worn once to a wedding and never again, fit like it was sewn for her. It hugged curves that months of stretching grocery budgets had made leaner, more angular. Elegant, she'd thought in the mirror. Desperate, she thought now, surrounded by women who wore designer labels like second skins because they were. A waiter glided past with a tray of canapés that probably cost more than her electric bill. She didn't take one. Couldn't risk the lipstick her roommate had also lent her, the one luxury that made her mouth look like it belonged to someone who mattered. "First time?" a voice asked beside her. Belinda turned to find a woman in her 50s, diamonds at her throat catching light like captured stars. Her smile was kind but assessing. "Is it that obvious?" Belinda forced a laugh, light and careless, the way she imagined wealthy people laughed about things that didn't keep them awake at 3 a.m. "Only to someone who remembers her first time." The woman's eyes softened. "Charity auction for the Children's Hospital, yes? Dr. Morrison's initiative." Belinda's mind raced. She'd crashed this party following a lead from a former colleague. Someone had mentioned a tech investor attending, someone who might be hiring for their PR firm. It was supposed to be a networking event attached to some medical fundraiser. She'd gambled her last $20 on a taxi here. "Yes," Belinda said smoothly, though her heart hammered. "Dr. Morrison's work is inspiring. Isn't it?" The woman touched her arm gently. "Enjoy yourself, dear. These things are dreadfully boring once you've been to 100 of them." She glided away, leaving Belinda alone again in a sea of people who belonged. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. But what choice did she have? The eviction notice was taped to her apartment door. Her mother's medication cost more each month than Belinda made in 2 weeks at the coffee shop. The borrowed dress was her Hail Mary, her last desperate play at finding someone, anyone, who could offer her a lifeline that didn't involve drowning. She moved deeper into the room, shoulders back, chin up, channeling every ounce of confidence she didn't feel. That's when she felt it. Eyes. Not the casual glances of people cataloging new faces. Something heavier. More focused. Belinda turned slowly, scanning the crowd, and then... He stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a glass of what looked like whiskey in his hand. Tall, maybe 6'2", in a black suit that had definitely been tailored to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders and the lean power of his frame. Dark hair, styled but slightly disheveled, like he'd run his fingers through it. Sharp jawline. And eyes. Even from across the room, she could feel the intensity of them. He was looking directly at her. Not glancing. Not casually observing. Looking. Like he could see straight through the Valentino, through her careful makeup, through every lie she'd told herself in the mirror before coming here. Belinda's breath caught. He tilted his head slightly, a ghost of a smile touching his mouth, and began walking toward her. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This man moved through the crowd like a shark through water. People stepped aside without seeming to realize they were doing it. Conversations paused as he passed. Power radiated from him, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. She should leave. Should slip out before. You're new. His voice was deep, controlled, with an edge that suggested he wasn't asking a question so much as stating a fact he already knew. Up close, he was devastating. Not classically handsome. His features were too sharp for that, his presence too overwhelming. But magnetic in a way that made her pulse spike and her mouth go dry. "Ah, yes," Belinda managed, hating the slight tremor in her voice. First time attending one of Dr. Morrison's events. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement? Recognition? Is it? He took a slow sip of his whiskey, never breaking eye contact. "And what brings you to support pediatric cancer research tonight, Miss?" "Clark. Belinda Clark." She extended her hand, grateful when it didn't shake. "I believe in the cause." His hand engulfed hers, warm, calloused in a way that surprised her, strong. He held it a beat too long. "Ashton Brandon." He released her hand slowly. "I don't believe I've seen you at any of the Foundation's previous events. Are you a donor? Family friend of Dr. Morrison's?" The questions were casual, but she sensed a test beneath them. "I'm in PR," Belinda said, pivoting to the truth that served her. "I've been following the Foundation's work and wanted to attend, see if there might be ways to collaborate on raising awareness." It wasn't entirely a lie. If she got hired by anyone here, she'd absolutely help them with whatever they needed. Ashton's smile deepened, and somehow that felt more dangerous than his scrutiny. "PR? How enterprising." He gestured toward the VIP section, a cordoned-off area with better views and fewer people. "I have a table. Join me. I'd love to hear your ideas about raising awareness." It wasn't really an invitation. It was a command wrapped in velvet. Every nerve in Belinda's body screamed warnings. This man was dangerous. Not in an obvious way, but in the way that apex predators were dangerous. Come. Controlled. Absolutely certain of their power. But she'd come here to be audacious, hadn't she? To take risks she couldn't afford not to take? "I'd like that," she said, meeting his eyes with a confidence that cost her everything she had left. His smile turned genuine, and somehow that was the most terrifying thing yet. "Follow me, Miss Clark." He placed a hand on the small of her back, proprietary and warm even through the fabric of her borrowed dress. "I have a feeling this is going to be a very interesting evening." As he guided her through the crowd toward the VIP section, Belinda caught their reflection in one of the massive mirrors lining the ballroom. Her in her borrowed elegance, him in his obvious power, looking for all the world like they belonged together. The image was perfect. The lie was complete. And she had absolutely no idea that she'd just walked into a trap set by a man who'd been watching her long before she ever stepped into that dress. The VIP section was separated from the main ballroom by velvet ropes and the kind of quiet that only money could buy. Fewer people, more space, better champagne. The kind of place where deals were made and secrets were traded like currency. Ashton guided Belinda to a private table near the windows, the city sprawling below them like a kingdom laid out for inspection. She tried not to stare at the view, tried to act like she saw this sort of thing every day. "Sit," he said, and it wasn't harsh, but it wasn't exactly a request either. She sat, crossing her legs carefully, remembering to angle them the way her roommate had shown her. "It's what rich girls do, trust me." Ashton settled across from her, his large frame making the expensive chair look almost ordinary. He set his whiskey down with deliberate precision, then leaned back, studying her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "So," he said softly, "tell me about yourself, Belinda Clark." The way he said her name, slow, thoughtful, like he was tasting it, sent an unwelcome shiver down her spine. "There's not much to tell," she said, going for modest charm. "I work in PR, like I mentioned. Mostly small clients right now, but I'm looking to expand, take on more meaningful projects. The Foundation's mission really resonates with me." His eyes never left her face. "Which firm?" Her heart skipped. "I'm freelance at the moment. More flexibility that way." "I see." He picked up his glass, swirled the amber liquid. "And where did you study? Your approach to networking suggests formal training." The questions came calm and measured, but she felt each one like a scalpel, cutting closer to truth she couldn't afford to reveal. "Northwestern," she lied smoothly, naming a school she dreamed of but could never afford. "Graduated 3 years ago." "Interesting." Ashton took a sip. "I funded a new media lab there last year. Perhaps you used it." Belinda's blood went cold, but she forced a smile. "I was already graduated by then, unfortunately. But that's generous of you. I'm rarely generous without reason." He set the glass down and his eyes, God, those eyes, pinned her in place. "What's your reason for being here tonight, Belinda?" "The real one. I told you. You told me a story." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, and his voice dropped to something almost intimate. "A good one. Well rehearsed. But I've built my life on reading people, and you, beautiful as you are in that dress, are not who you're pretending to be." The air left her lungs. She should run. Should make an excuse and leave before this got worse. But his gaze held her captive, and beneath the danger, she sensed something else. Not anger. Curiosity. "I don't know what you mean," she tried. Ashton smiled, and it was almost kind. "Your shoes." "What?" "They're gorgeous. Louboutin, if I'm not mistaken. But they're a size too big. I watched you walking. You're tensing your toes with every step to keep them on." He tilted his head. "The dress fits perfectly, but you keep touching it like you're afraid it might disappear. And your clutch, designer label, but there's a coffee stain on the bottom corner that someone tried to scrub out." Belinda's face burned. She'd been so careful, so meticulous, and he'd seen through everything in minutes. "You're observant," she said quietly, dropping the pretense because what was the point now? "I'm alive because I'm observant." He studied her with something that looked almost like approval. "So I'll ask again, and this time, I'd appreciate the truth. Why are you really here?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed in her clutch. Once. Twice. Insistent. She tried to ignore it, but Ashton's eyes flicked to the bag. "You should check that," he said. "Might be important." It was a dare wrapped in permission. With trembling fingers, Belinda opened the clutch and pulled out her phone. The screen lit up with notifications. Final notice. Payment overdue. Eviction proceedings begin Monday. Your mother's prescription is ready for pickup. Total $847.62. Automated message. Your account balance is minus $43.18. Overdraft fees apply. She tried to tilt the screen away, but not before Ashton's sharp eyes caught the words. She watched his expression change, not to disgust or dismissal, but to something more complicated. Understanding, maybe. Or confirmation of a suspicion. Belinda's hands shook as she shoved the phone back into her clutch. The game was over. The borrowed dress suddenly felt like a costume from a play that had just closed mid-performance. "I should go," she whispered, standing abruptly. "I'm sorry for wasting your time." "Sit down." The command in his voice stopped her mid-turn. Not loud, not harsh, just absolutely certain that she would obey. And God help her, she sat. Ashton leaned back again, that intense gaze never wavering. "You didn't answer my question." Belinda's throat tightened. Pride warred with desperation, and desperation won because it always did when you were drowning. "I needed to be here," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I heard there might be potential clients, people who could hire me for real work. I borrowed the dress because I couldn't afford one of my own. I spent my last $20 on a taxi here because walking would have ruined the shoes." She laughed, bitter and broken. "I don't belong here. I know that. But I'm so desperate that I convinced myself audacity might be enough." The silence that followed felt like falling. Ashton said nothing for a long moment, just watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then slowly, he picked up his whiskey and finished it in one smooth swallow. "You don't belong here," he said finally. The words hit like a physical blow, confirming her worst fears. "I know." Belinda stood again, dignity in tatters. "I'm sorry. I'll leave." "I wasn't finished." His voice stopped her again. "You don't belong here, in this room full of people who inherited their worth or married into it or stumbled into it through luck. You belong somewhere else entirely." She turned back slowly, confused. Ashton stood, buttoning his suit jacket with casual grace, and moved around the table until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark and utterly masculine. "Do you know what I saw when you walked into this ballroom?" he asked softly. Belinda shook her head, not trusting her voice. "A woman who walked into a room full of predators wearing borrowed armor and acted like she owned the place anyway." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "That's not desperation, Belinda. That's power. The kind money can't buy." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying." He reached out and caught a strand of her hair that had escaped its careful updo, tucking it behind her ear with surprising gentleness. "You came here looking for an opportunity. And I'm going to give you one. But it's not what you expected." Warning bells clanged in her mind. "I don't understand." "I need someone," Ashton said, his voice low and intimate. "Someone who can move between worlds. Someone desperate enough to take risks, smart enough to learn quickly, and audacious enough to walk into places she doesn't belong and make people believe she does." "For what?" His smile turned dangerous. "For me." The way he said it, possessive, absolute, sent heat and ice warring through her veins. "I don't even know who you are," Belinda said, though that wasn't entirely true. "Ashton Brandon." She'd heard the name whispered at the edges of the party, seen the way people deferred to him. Power recognized power, and this man had it in spades. "Then let me clarify." He stepped closer, crowding her space in a way that should have felt threatening but instead felt oddly protective. "I run an empire, Belinda. The kind that operates in shadows and makes kings out of whispers. I need someone who can be invisible when necessary and unforgettable when required. You've already proven you can do both. You're talking about something illegal." It wasn't a question. "I'm talking about survival." His eyes held hers. "Mine. And yours. You need money? I'll clear your debts tonight. Every single one. Your mother's medication? Handled. Rent. Not a concern you'll ever have again." It sounded like a dream. Like an answer to prayers she'd stopped believing anyone heard. "What's the catch?" she whispered. "You belong to me now. Simple. direct, terrifying. My protection. My rules. My world. You go where I say, do what I ask, and in return, you never have to wear borrowed dresses or check your bank account with fear again. Belinda's mind reeled. This was insane. He was offering her everything she needed, but the price. I'm not sleeping with you for money, she said, lifting her chin. Ashton's laugh was genuine, surprised. I don't pay for sex, Belinda. If I wanted you in my bed, I'd seduce you properly. His eyes darkened. And you'd come willingly. The arrogance should have infuriated her. Instead, heat pooled low in her belly because something in his absolute certainty suggested he wasn't wrong. Then what do you want from me? Loyalty, he said simply. Obedience when it matters. And that audacity that brought you here tonight. The rest. He stepped back, giving her breathing room she hadn't realized she desperately needed. The rest we'll figure out together. Belinda's phone buzzed again in her clutch. Another reminder of debts she couldn't pay, futures she couldn't afford. She looked at Ashton Brandon, this dangerous, powerful man who'd seen through her lies and offered her salvation wrapped in velvet chains. Why me? She asked. You could have anyone. Why choose someone you caught lying? His smile turned almost tender. Because you walked in here like you had nothing to lose, knowing you had everything to lose. That's the kind of courage that can't be taught, Belinda. It can only be born from fire. He extended his hand, palm up. An invitation. A trap. A lifeline. Say yes, Ashton murmured. And I promise you'll never be desperate again. Belinda stared at his hand, strong, scarred knuckles suggesting violence she couldn't imagine, but offered with surprising gentleness. This is crazy. This is absolutely insane. But what did she have to lose that she hadn't already lost? Slowly, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs, Belinda placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers. Warm, possessive, absolute. Good girl, Ashton said softly, and the approval in his voice sent shivers down her spine. Welcome to my world, Belinda Clark. I promise it won't be boring. As he led her from the VIP section toward the exit, Belinda caught one last glimpse of the ballroom in the mirrors. The glittering crowd, the borrowed elegance, the life she'd tried to fake her way into. She was leaving it all behind. For something far more dangerous. And God help her, she couldn't wait to see what came next. Ashton's car was exactly what Belinda expected. A black Mercedes S-Class with windows tinted dark enough to hide secrets. A driver materialized from nowhere, opening the rear door with the kind of silent efficiency that spoke of years of practice. After you, Ashton said, his hand still warm against the small of her back. Belinda hesitated at the threshold. Getting into this car felt irrevocable, like crossing a border into a country she could never leave. Having second thoughts? Ashton's voice held amusement, but his eyes were watchful. Third and fourth thoughts, actually, she admitted. Good. That means you're smarter than you are desperate. He gestured again. But we both know you're getting in anyway. He was right, and they both knew it. Belinda slid into the leather interior, and Ashton followed, the door closing with a heavy final sound. The driver pulled smoothly into traffic without needing instructions, as if he already knew where they were going. The silence in the car felt thick, expensive. Belinda kept her hands folded in her lap, hyper-aware of Ashton's presence beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, far enough that they weren't touching. Where are we going? She asked finally. My office. We need to discuss terms properly. He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, then returned his attention to her. Your debts. I need exact numbers. Rent arrears, medical bills, credit cards. Everything. The clinical efficiency of it jarred her. You're serious. You're actually going to. I don't make offers I can't keep. He turned slightly in his seat to face her fully. By morning, every creditor threatening you will be paid in full. But I need transparency, Belinda. If you hide debts and they surface later, there will be consequences. The word consequences hung in the air like a threat wrapped in silk. Total is about 47,000, Belinda said quietly, shame heating her cheeks. Maybe more with the fees and interest that keep compounding. I stopped checking after a while because it just kept getting worse. Ashton didn't flinch. 47,000 was probably what he spent on suits. Acceptable, he said simply. What about family? Anyone else who might need financial assistance? My mother. She's in a care facility, early onset dementia. The medication helps slow the progression, but insurance only covers part of it. Belinda's voice cracked slightly. She doesn't even remember who I am most days, but I can't just abandon her. Something shifted in Ashton's expression. Not pity, something more complicated. The facility she's in now, is it adequate? Belinda almost laughed. It's what I can afford, which means it's barely adequate. But the waiting list for better places is years long, and the cost. I'll handle it, Ashton interrupted. There's a private facility in Connecticut. Best dementia care in the country. She'll be transferred within the week. Belinda's breath stuttered. That place costs. I looked into it once. It's over 15,000 a month. Is it? Ashton's tone suggested he genuinely didn't know because the amount was meaningless to him. Consider it handled. Tears burned behind Belinda's eyes. This was too much, too fast, too good to be true. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all this for someone you just met? Ashton was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as if choosing his words carefully. Because I can, he said finally. And because you're going to be valuable to me. Consider it an investment in my own interests. The honesty was almost brutal, but Belinda appreciated it more than pretty lies. The car pulled up to a high-rise building in the financial district, all steel and glass and intimidating architecture. They rode a private elevator to the top floor in silence, and when the doors opened, Belinda stepped into an office that looked more like a throne room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Modern furniture in blacks and grays. Abstract art that probably cost more than her entire life savings would ever be. And behind a massive desk, shadows that seemed to hold secrets. Sit, Ashton said, gesturing to one of the chairs facing his desk. He moved behind it, suddenly all business, and pulled out a file folder. Belinda sat, feeling small and out of place again despite everything. Ashton slid a document across the desk. Non-disclosure agreement. Everything you see, hear, or learn about me and my business stays confidential. Violation results in legal action severe enough to make your current debt look like pocket change. She picked it up with trembling hands. The legal language was dense, intimidating. You should probably have a lawyer review this, Ashton said, almost gently. Can I afford one? His lips quirked. Fair point. The summary. You don't talk about me, my business, or anything you witness. Ever. Not to friends, family, police, or press. The penalty for breaking this is financially ruinous and potentially criminal. Belinda swallowed hard. And if I sign it? Then we discuss the actual arrangement. He leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I need someone who can attend events, gather information, deliver messages, and occasionally act as my companion in social situations. You'll be educated in my world, how it works, who matters, what risks exist. You mean I'll be a spy? The word felt dangerous on her tongue. I mean you'll be my eyes and ears in places I can't always be. Ashton's gaze intensified. You'll live in a property I own, for your safety and my convenience. You'll be available when I need you, which may be at odd hours. You'll follow instructions exactly as given, no improvisation unless circumstances demand it. And if I refuse an instruction? Then we'd have a conversation about why. His tone suggested those conversations wouldn't be pleasant. But refusal isn't really an option, Belinda. You belong to me now. That's the deal. The possessiveness in his voice sent conflicting signals through her body. Fear and something dangerously close to excitement. For how long? She asked. Indefinite. Until I decide you're no longer useful or you prove untrustworthy. He paused. Or until you want to leave. That surprised her. I can leave. You can try. Ashton's smile was dark. But my world doesn't let go easily. Once you're in, you'll know too much. Leaving would require arrangements, safeguards. It's possible but complicated. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected, he corrected. There's a difference. My enemies will see you as leverage against me. That makes you a target. But it also makes you valuable enough for me to ensure nothing happens to you. Belinda's head spun. This was insane. She should run. Should tear up the NDA and walk out and take her chances with eviction and debt collectors. But her mother's face flashed in her mind. Confused, frightened, lost in a facility that smelled like industrial cleaner and despair. And her own apartment, with its broken heating and the notice taped to the door. And the endless grinding weight of poverty that made every day a battle just to survive. What about my job? At the coffee shop. You quit tomorrow. I'll compensate you more than adequately. Ashton pulled out another document. This outlines your monthly allowance. It should cover personal expenses, clothing appropriate for the events you'll attend, and anything else you need. Belinda looked at the number and nearly choked. It was more than she made in 6 months. This is non-negotiable, Ashton finished. You'll need to look the part. Consider it a business expense. She stared at the papers in front of her. Her future, or her prison sentence, depending on how she looked at it. I need you to understand something, Ashton said, his voice dropping to something almost intimate. This isn't a game. My world is dangerous. People die in it. Fortunes are made and destroyed. Power is the only currency that matters, and I have more of it than most. But that power comes with enemies, vicious, patient, and creative ones. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to be honest with you. He stood and came around the desk, leaning against it directly in front of her. You walked into that party wearing courage like armor. I need to know if that courage goes deeper than a borrowed dress. Belinda met his eyes, those dark, penetrating eyes that seemed to see everything she tried to hide. I'm terrified, she admitted. But I've been terrified for years. At least this terror comes with a chance at something better. Ashton's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Then sign the papers, Belinda. Join my world. Let me handle your burdens while you learn to handle mine. He handed her a pen. Heavy, expensive, probably worth more than her rent. Her hand shook as she reached for it. Once I sign this, there's no going back? She asked. There's always a way back, Ashton said quietly. But forward is far more interesting. Belinda thought of audacity, the lesson from the beginning of this impossible night. The power of standing in places you don't belong. Of being bold when you have every reason to be afraid. She'd worn a borrowed dress and crashed an elite party. She'd caught the attention of a man who could destroy her or save her with equal ease. She'd walked into his world with nothing but desperation and nerve. Why stop now? Belinda pressed the pen to paper and signed her name in quick, decisive strokes. Once. Twice. 3 times across different documents. When she looked up, Ashton was smiling. Really smiling. Not the dangerous half-curve but something genuine. Welcome to my empire, Belinda Clark. He extended his hand again, and she took it, his grip firm and warm. I promise you won't regret this. And if I do? She couldn't help asking. His smile turned wicked. Then I'll make sure you're compensated for your regrets. He pulled out his phone and made a call, crisp and efficient. Marcus. He paused, then corrected himself with a slight smirk. Robert, transfer 47,000 to clear debts for Belinda Clark. I'll send you the creditor information within the hour. Also, arrange transfer for her mother to Meadowbrook facility in Connecticut, priority admission. And prepare the penthouse in Chelsea. She moves in tomorrow. He hung up and turned back to her. Done. Your debts will be cleared by morning. Your mother will have the best care available. And you'll never sleep in a place with broken heating again. Belinda felt dizzy. In less than an hour, her entire life had transformed. What do I do now? She whispered. Ashton's eyes gleamed. Now? Now you go home to your apartment one last time. Pack what matters. Tomorrow, your new life begins. He stepped closer, and she tilted her head back to maintain eye contact. And Belinda? His voice dropped to a murmur that seemed to vibrate through her bones. Get some rest. Because the moment you step into my world completely, everything changes. And I don't go easy on what's mine. What's mine? The words should have terrified her. Instead, they felt like a promise. The penthouse in Chelsea was obscene. Belinda stood in the marble foyer the next evening, a single worn duffel bag clutched in her hand, and tried not to gape like the imposter she still felt like. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a twilight view of the Hudson River. The furniture looked like it belonged in architectural magazines. Everything gleamed, chrome, glass, polished wood that probably cost more per square foot than her entire former apartment. Miss Clark. A woman in her 40s appeared from somewhere deeper in the apartment, her posture military straight, her expression professionally neutral. I'm Patricia. I manage Mr. Brandon's properties. He asked me to ensure you're settled comfortably. Thank you. Belinda felt ridiculous with her threadbare duffel amid all this luxury. Patricia's expression softened fractionally. Let me show you to your room. Mr. Brandon has arranged for a wardrobe consultant to meet with you tomorrow morning, but there are basics in the closet for tonight. Her room turned out to be larger than her entire previous apartment. A king-sized bed with linens that probably had a thread count higher than her credit score. An ensuite bathroom with a tub big enough to swim in. And the closet. Belinda opened it to find it already stocked. Designer clothes in her exact size, shoes that actually fit, accessories organized like a boutique display. How did he? She turned to Patricia. Mr. Brandon is very thorough. Patricia's tone suggested this was an understatement. There's a phone on the nightstand. His direct line is programmed as number 1. He expects you to answer when he calls, regardless of the hour. The reminder of her new reality settled over Belinda like a weighted blanket, comforting and suffocating at once. Is there anything else you need? Patricia asked. I don't even know what to need, Belinda admitted. Patricia's expression turned almost kind. Then rest, Miss Clark. Tomorrow will be demanding. After Patricia left, Belinda explored her new prison. No, her new home. The kitchen was stocked with food she'd never be able to afford on her own. The living room had a sound system more sophisticated than anything she'd seen. There was even a small office with a desk and a laptop, everything pristine and waiting. She found herself at the windows as night fell completely, the city spreading out below in rivers of light. Somewhere out there was her old life, the coffee shop where she'd quit that morning via stammered phone call, the apartment she'd never see again, the version of herself who'd thought wearing a borrowed dress was the boldest thing she could do. That Belinda seemed like a stranger now. Her new phone buzzed, the expensive one Patricia had left on the counter. A message appeared. "How's the view?" Belinda's heart jumped. She turned slowly, scanning the penthouse, suddenly paranoid. Another message. "Relax. I'm not there. Camera in the living room. Security purposes. I'm watching remotely." She spotted it then, a small lens hidden in what she'd thought was a smoke detector. Her fingers trembled as she typed. "The view is incredible. Also, you're watching me? I told you, you're mine to protect. That includes knowing you're safe." The possessiveness should have angered her. Instead, it sent an unwelcome flutter through her stomach. "Is this how it's going to be? You monitoring my every move?" "Only the important ones. Get used to it, Belinda. Privacy is a luxury you traded for security." She wanted to argue, to push back against the casual dominance in his words. But what ground did she have to stand on? She'd signed the papers, taken his money, moved into his property. "When do I start? Whatever it is I'm supposed to do for you." "Tomorrow night. I have an event, fundraiser for a city councilman. You'll accompany me. Patricia will ensure you're ready." "What do I need to do there?" "Look beautiful. Stay close. Listen more than you speak. I'll handle the rest." Belinda stared at the message, anxiety coiling in her chest. "I don't know how to do this. How to be whatever you need me to be." The response took longer this time. When it came, it was unexpected. "You already did it once. Remember? You walked into that party and convinced a room full of sharks you belonged there. Same principle. Different stakes. What if I fail? You won't. I don't invest in failures." The confidence in those words, absolute, unshakable, should have felt like pressure. Instead, it felt oddly steadying. "Get some rest." Another message appeared. "Tomorrow, your education begins." The phone went quiet after that, but Belinda couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She moved through the penthouse, hyper-aware of the camera, wondering what Ashton saw when he looked at her through that lens. Did he see the girl in the borrowed dress? Or something else entirely? The next morning arrived with Patricia's sharp knock at 7 a.m. "Mr. Brandon has arranged a full day," Patricia announced, handing Belinda a coffee that was exactly how she liked it, which meant he'd somehow learned that detail too. "Wardrobe consultant at 8. Hair and makeup tutorial at 10. Lunch meeting with Mr. Brandon at 1. Etiquette briefing at 3. Belinda's head spun. "Etiquette briefing? You'll be attending high-profile events. There are expectations." Patricia's tone was delicate. "Mr. Brandon wants you prepared." The wardrobe consultant turned out to be a severe woman named Dominique who looked at Belinda like a sculptor examining raw marble. Dominique circled her, assessing. "Good bone structure. The body needs toning, but we can work with this." She pulled out a tablet. Mr. Brandon sent specific requirements. Elegant but not ostentatious, sophisticated but approachable, memorable but not attention-seeking. "That's very specific," Belinda said. "Mr. Brandon is always specific." Dominique began pulling clothes from racks wheeled in by assistants. "You're representing him now. Everything about your appearance reflects on his taste, his power, his attention to detail." The next 2 hours were a whirlwind of fabrics and fittings, Dominique explaining the subtle language of high-end fashion. How hemlines and necklines and jewelry choices all communicated messages Belinda had never known existed. The hair and makeup tutorial was equally intense. A stylist named James taught her techniques she'd never imagined. How to look natural while wearing extensive makeup, how to style her hair for maximum impact with minimal effort. "You're a quick study," James commented, watching her practice a smoky eye. "Most of Mr. Brandon's associates require more coaching." Associates. Belinda caught the hesitation. James's expression shuttered. Previous appointments. "Now, let's work on your lip liner technique." By the time 1 o'clock arrived, Belinda was exhausted and her brain was overflowing with information about thread counts and color theory, and the 17 different forks she might encounter at a formal dinner. Patricia led her to a car waiting downstairs. Not the Mercedes from before, but a sleek Audi with tinted windows. The driver nodded silently and pulled into traffic. They arrived at a restaurant Belinda recognized from magazine spreads. The kind of place where reservations required 6 months' notice and connections she'd never have. But apparently, Ashton had both. He was already seated at a private table in the back, and when Belinda approached, he stood with the kind of old-fashioned manners that seemed at odds with his dangerous reputation. "Belinda!" He took her hand, kissed her knuckles, a gesture that sent electricity up her arm. "You look rested." "I look terrified," she corrected, sitting when he gestured. His smile was genuine. "That too. But you hide it well. Dominique's work, among others. Do you always orchestrate people's lives this thoroughly?" "Only people I value." He signaled a waiter with the barest gesture. "Order anything. We have an hour before your etiquette session." Belinda scanned the menu and nearly choked at the prices. "Ashton, this is necessary," he interrupted gently. "You need to become comfortable in these spaces. Start by ordering like you belong here." It felt like a test. Belinda lifted her chin and ordered the prix-fixe menu with a confidence she didn't feel. Ashton's approving nod felt like winning something. "Tell me about your mother," he said once the waiter left. "How long has she been sick?" The personal question surprised her. 3 years since diagnosis. But looking back, there were signs earlier. She'd forget conversations, repeat questions. Belinda's throat tightened. "I was working 2 jobs, trying to pay for community college. I missed the signs until they became impossible to ignore." "You blame yourself." "Not a question." "Shouldn't I?" "I was so focused on escaping poverty that I didn't see my mother disappearing." Ashton was quiet for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I lost my mother when I was 12. Cancer. My father remarried within a year, a woman who saw me as competition for inheritance rather than a stepson." He took a sip of water. "I spent my teenage years learning that vulnerability is a weapon people use against you." The revelation felt significant, a crack in his controlled exterior. "Is that why you—" Belinda gestured vaguely, encompassing his empire, his power, his need for control. "Partially. Also because I'm very good at reading people and even better at leveraging their weaknesses." His eyes met hers. Present company included. "You mean my desperation." "I mean your courage masquerading as desperation." He leaned forward slightly. "Most people in your situation would have applied for government assistance, moved back with family, accepted their poverty as fate. You put on a borrowed dress and crashed a party full of people who could have humiliated you, all for the chance at something better. That's not desperation, Belinda. That's ambition wearing desperation's clothes." His words unsettled her, mostly because they might be true. "What happens tonight?" she asked, changing the subject. At this fundraiser? You stay close to me. You smile but not too much. You're polite to everyone but familiar with no one. You remember faces and names. I'll quiz you later. And if anyone asks who you are. He paused. You're my companion. Let them make assumptions. Don't confirm or deny. So I'm mysterious. You're mine, he corrected, that possessive edge returning. That's the only definition that matters. Their food arrived, and Ashton spent the meal subtly correcting her table manners. Which fork for which course, how to pace herself, when to engage the staff. It should have felt condescending, but his tone was patient, almost professorial. You learn quickly, he observed as dessert arrived. That will serve you well. I've had practice adapting. Poverty teaches you to read rooms, figure out what people want, become whatever gets you through the door. Belinda met his gaze. I've been playing roles my whole life, Ashton. This is just a more expensive costume. Something flickered in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Then let me give you one piece of advice about the role you're playing now, he said softly, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. The touch was warm, deliberate, possessive. Stop thinking of it as a role. In my world, the moment you doubt your right to be somewhere, predators smell it. You belong at my side tonight because I say you do. Believe that, and everyone else will too. His hand lingered on hers, thumb stroking her knuckles in a way that felt far too intimate for a business arrangement. What if they ask about us? Belinda whispered, hyper-aware of his touch. About what we are to each other? Ashton's smile turned dangerous. Tell them the truth, that you're mine, and I don't share my possessions. Let them wonder about the rest. He pulled his hand back, and Belinda immediately missed the warmth. Patricia will have you ready by 7, he said, returning to business as if that moment hadn't happened. I'll collect you myself. And Belinda. His eyes locked on hers. Tonight, the real test begins. Don't disappoint me. It sounded like a threat. It felt like a promise. And as Belinda left the restaurant to continue her transformation into whatever Ashton Brandon needed her to be, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was crossing another threshold. One that would change her even more fundamentally than signing those papers had. She was entering his world completely now. And God help her, part of her was desperate to see how deep that world went. The fundraiser was exactly as Ashton predicted. A glittering performance of wealth and influence where every smile hid a calculation. Belinda stayed at his side, her hand resting in the crook of his arm, feeling the coiled strength beneath his tailored jacket. She was wearing emerald silk that Dominique had selected. Elegant, expensive, undeniably his. And the way Ashton's eyes had darkened when she'd emerged from her room told her the choice had been deliberate. Councilman Peters. Ashton greeted a silver-haired man smoothly. Allow me to introduce Belinda Clark. Charming, Peters said, his eyes lingering too long on her neckline. Where did Brandon find such a lovely companion? I found him actually, Belinda said before Ashton could respond, channeling every ounce of confidence. At a charity event. His generosity was compelling. Ashton's hand tightened fractionally on her waist. Approval or warning, she couldn't tell. The evening progressed in a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Belinda absorbed names, connections, the subtle hierarchies that Ashton had taught her to recognize. She was good at this, she realized. Years of reading coffee shop customers, anticipating needs, playing roles, it all translated. But then everything changed. They were in a quieter corner, Ashton discussing something in low tones with a businessman, when Belinda noticed them. Two men, moving with purposeful casualness toward their position. Something about their body language screamed danger. Ashton! she murmured, interrupting. He glanced at her, read something in her expression, and his entire demeanor shifted. Not visibly, he was too controlled for that, but she felt the change, the way a predator becomes suddenly alert. "Excuse us," Ashton said to the businessman, his hand firm on Belinda's back as he guided her toward the exit. But they weren't fast enough. "Brandon." One of the men blocked their path, smiling with too many teeth. "Leaving so soon? We haven't had a chance to chat." "Victor." Ashton's voice was ice. "This isn't the venue." "Isn't it?" Victor's eyes slid to Belinda, assessing, cataloging. "Pretty new acquisition. Does she know what you really do? Or is she just another pretty lie?" Belinda's pulse spiked. The menace radiating from this man was palpable. "Walk away," Ashton said quietly, but there was steel beneath the silk. "Or what? You'll make a scene at the councilman's fundraiser." Victor laughed. "We both know you can't afford that kind of attention." What happened next was so fast Belinda barely processed it. Victor reached for her arm, whether to intimidate or harm, she'd never know, and Ashton moved. One moment Victor was smirking. The next, he was against the wall, Ashton's forearm across his throat, the violence so swift and controlled that no one else in the room even noticed. "Touch what's mine again," Ashton said, his voice barely above a whisper, "and I'll make sure you lose the hand. Are we clear?" Victor's eyes widened, but he managed a nod. Ashton released him and turned to Belinda, his expression smoothing into perfect calm. "We're leaving." The car ride back was silent, tension thick enough to choke on. Belinda's hands trembled in her lap as adrenaline crashed through her system. She'd seen violence before. Growing up poor taught you that, but this was different. This was calculated, professional, terrifying. "Are you hurt?" Ashton asked quietly. "No, Her voice cracked. "What the hell was that?" "A reminder that my world has consequences." He pulled out his phone, typed rapidly. "Victor works for the Kozlov family. They've been trying to move into my territory for months. Tonight was a message. A message that involved me." Belinda's fear was crystallizing into anger. "You used me as bait. I used you as my companion, which makes you valuable to my enemies." Ashton's jaw tightened. "I told you this wouldn't be safe. You told me a lot of things. You didn't tell me I'd be a target for whatever the hell that was." The car pulled up to the penthouse. Ashton got out, came around, and opened her door with rigid formality. They rode the elevator in brittle silence. Inside the penthouse, Belinda's composure finally shattered. Her hands shook so badly she couldn't unzip her dress. The fear she'd suppressed at the fundraiser came flooding back. Victor's cold eyes, the casual way he'd talked about her like she was property, the violence in Ashton's response. She sank onto the couch, and the tears came before she could stop them. "Belinda." Ashton's voice was closer than expected. "Don't." She held up a hand. "Just don't." But he didn't listen. He sat beside her, not touching, just present. "I'm sorry," he said finally, and the words sounded rusty, like he didn't use them often. "I underestimated how quickly they'd move. That was my miscalculation, and you paid the price in fear." Belinda laughed bitterly through her tears. "You think an apology fixes this?" "No. But it's a start." He was quiet for a moment. "You want to know why I noticed you at that party?" "Really?" She looked at him through blurred vision. "You walked in wearing borrowed armor, but you held your head like a queen," Ashton said softly. "Everyone else in that room was born into their confidence or bought it with family money. But you earned yours. Forged it in fire and desperation and sheer stubborn will. That kind of strength is rare, Belinda." It's the kind that doesn't break under pressure. It's why I chose you. I'm terrified, she whispered. I know. So am I. That stopped her. You. Every day. Fear is what keeps you sharp, keeps you alive. His hand moved to cover hers, gentle despite the violence she'd seen him capable of. The difference is learning to function despite it. Belinda stared at their joined hands, his scarred and strong, hers still trembling. Tell me about your scars, she said suddenly. The ones on your knuckles. Ashton was silent so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father's second wife had a son. He thought taking me down would elevate his position in the family business. I was 15. He was 18 and outweighed me by 40 pounds. What happened? I learned that size doesn't matter as much as ruthlessness. And that if you're going to fight, you fight to win, no matter the cost. He turned her hand over, his thumb tracing her palm. These scars remind me that survival requires sacrifice. Sometimes of your innocence. Sometimes of your mercy. The intimacy of the moment wrapped around them like fog. I don't know if I can do this, Belinda admitted. Be in your world. Be. Whatever you need me to be. You already are, Ashton said, and there was something raw in his voice. You just don't see it yet. He stood, pulled her to her feet, and reached around to unzip her dress, the task she'd been unable to manage herself. His fingers were warm against her spine, the gesture oddly tender. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow, I'll teach you how to recognize threats before they reach you. How to move through my world with your eyes open. And tonight. His hand lingered at the small of her back. Tonight, you survived your first real test. That's enough. The next 2 weeks transformed Belinda in ways she couldn't have imagined. Ashton became her constant teacher, showing her the invisible language of power, the subtle tells that revealed intentions, the art of strategic conversation. But more than that, they talked. Late nights in his office while he worked, Belinda curled in the leather chair across from his desk, asking questions he answered with surprising honesty. Early mornings over coffee before his first meetings, sharing stories that revealed the humans beneath their carefully constructed roles. She learned he had a sister he hadn't spoken to in 5 years over a betrayal he wouldn't name. That he'd built his empire from nothing after his father cut him off at 18 for refusing to marry a business associate's daughter. That he read poetry, Neruda and Rilke, in the quiet hours before dawn. He learned she'd wanted to be a teacher before poverty derailed her college plans. That she played piano, or had before they'd sold hers to pay rent. That she still called her mother every Sunday, even though her mother rarely remembered who she was. Play for me, Ashton said one evening, gesturing to the grand piano she'd been admiring in his penthouse. I haven't played in years. I'll be terrible. I don't care about perfect. I care about real. So she played, halting, rusty, but the muscle memory returning with each note. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat, the piece her mother used to love. When she finished, she found Ashton standing close, his expression unguarded in a way she'd never seen. Beautiful, he said softly, and she knew he didn't just mean the music. The moment stretched, charged with possibilities neither was quite ready to name. Have you ever let someone see the real you behind your armor? What happened? Share your story in the comments. Thank you, Ashton said finally, for trusting me with that. You're paying me to trust you, Belinda pointed out, but there was no bite in it. No. I'm paying you to work for me. The trust. That's something else entirely. Their relationship shifted after that night. Still professional on the surface, but underneath, something deeper was growing. Ashton's touches lingered longer, a hand at her waist during events, fingers brushing hers when passing documents, his jacket draped over her shoulders when she was cold. And Belinda found herself leaning into those touches, craving them, missing them when they stopped. 3 weeks in, he took her to a private gallery showing. Not for business, just because she'd mentioned loving art but never being able to afford museum tickets. They walked through the exhibition alone after hours, Ashton having bought out the entire evening. This one, Belinda stopped in front of an abstract piece, blues and grays swirling like storm clouds. It feels like drowning and flying at the same time. Is that how you feel? Ashton asked. In my world. She considered. Sometimes. Like I'm falling, but I might learn to fly if I just let go of the fear. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Then let go, Belinda. I'll catch you. The kiss happened so naturally it felt inevitable. His lips soft against hers, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, when she leaned in instead, her hands fisting in his shirt, the kiss deepened into something that stole her breath and rewrote her understanding of what desire felt like. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ashton pressed his forehead to hers. I shouldn't want you this much, he murmured. It's dangerous. Makes you a liability I can't afford. Then stop, Belinda whispered, even though the thought made her ache. I can't. God help me, I can't. He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was memorizing the taste of her. And Belinda realized with startling clarity that she'd fallen for the man beneath the monster everyone else saw. The discovery happened by accident. Belinda was looking for a file Ashton had asked her to retrieve from his office. She opened the wrong drawer and found it, a folder with her name on it. Inside, photos of her from before they met. At the coffee shop. Walking to her apartment. Sitting with her mother at the care facility. Dozens of them, spanning weeks before the party. And beneath them, documents. Her debt records. Her work history. Her mother's medical files. A dossier so complete it made her stomach turn. You had everything planned, she whispered, her hand shaking as she spread the evidence across his desk. The party, my desperation, all of it. You manufactured this. Ashton appeared in the doorway, and his expression told her everything she needed to know. No surprise. No denial. Yes, he said simply. Yes. Belinda's voice rose. That's all you have to say? You stalked me, manipulated my life, orchestrated my desperation so I'd have no choice but to come to you, and all you can say is yes? What do you want me to say? Ashton's voice was maddeningly calm. That I'm sorry? I'm not. That I'd do it differently? I wouldn't. You never gave me a choice. She threw the folder at him, papers scattering. Everything, every single thing about us has been a lie. Not everything. He stepped toward her, and she stepped back. My feelings for you are real, Belinda. Everything else might have been strategy, but what I feel. Don't you dare. Tears streamed down her face. Don't you dare talk about feelings when you've been playing me like a chess piece from the beginning. Was any of it real? The conversations? The kiss? Or was I just another acquisition, another possession to add to your empire? Ashton's jaw tightened. You think I manipulate everyone I want into my bed? I could have had you 12 times if that's all I wanted. I didn't orchestrate your desperation to sleep with you, Belinda. I did it because you would never have chosen someone like me otherwise. Someone like you? She laughed bitterly. A liar? A manipulator? Someone who treats people like objects to be moved around until they're useful? You're right. I never would have chosen that. I would have chosen the man I thought you were, the one who saw me as more than a tool, who valued my audacity instead of exploiting it. I do value it. His control was cracking now, voice rising to match hers. Why do you think I chose you? Not the 1,000 other desperate people in this city, but you? Because you had something money can't create and power can't buy. Genuine courage. Raw, unfakeable strength. And yes, I manipulated circumstances to bring you to me, but everything after was your choice. You chose to sign those papers. You chose to stay. You chose to kiss me back. Because I thought, her voice broke. I thought I mattered to you. Not as an asset. As a person. You do matter. Ashton's hands fisted at his sides, like he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. More than anyone has mattered in years. Why do you think I'm telling you the truth now? I could have hidden this, destroyed the evidence, and you never would have known. But I'm tired of lying to you, even by omission. How convenient, this honesty you've suddenly discovered. Belinda grabbed her purse, her whole body shaking. I want out. I want my debts cleared like you promised, my mother in that facility, and then I want nothing to do with you or your manipulative, possessive world. You signed a contract. Sue me. Oh wait. I have nothing for you to take, remember? That's why you picked me. The desperate girl with nothing to lose. She headed for the door. Belinda, wait. Don't follow me. Don't call me. Don't send your people to watch me. She turned at the threshold, and the look on her face made him flinch. You wanted me to belong to you? Congratulations. You destroyed the only part of me that ever could have. She left, and Ashton didn't follow. He stood in his office, surrounded by scattered papers documenting his manipulation, and for the first time in years, felt something uncomfortably close to regret. Belinda lasted 3 days in a hotel room paid for with the last of her dwindling cash before reality crashed down. She'd left Ashton's world, but his world hadn't left her. The first sign was subtle. A man watching her in the hotel lobby. The second was less so, her room being searched while she was out, nothing taken but everything disturbed. By the third day, the message was clear. She knew too much to simply walk away, and Ashton's enemies knew it. Victor found her in a coffee shop, sliding into the seat across from her with that same predatory smile. Lovers quarrel? He asked pleasantly. Ashton must be slipping if he's letting you wander around unprotected. I don't need his protection. No. Victor's smile widened. Then you won't mind answering a few questions about his business operations. Storage locations. Distribution networks. Financial institutions he uses. Belinda's blood ran cold. I don't know anything about that. You lived with him for a month. Don't insult my intelligence. He leaned closer. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me everything you know, or I'm going to make you wish you had. Starting with that lovely mother of yours in Connecticut. The threat against her mother made something snap inside Belinda. She'd spent her whole life being pushed around by circumstances, by poverty, by people with power. She'd let Ashton manipulate her into his world, then fled when the manipulation was revealed. But running hadn't made her free. It had just made her vulnerable. No, she said clearly. Victor's expression darkened. Excuse me. I said no. You want information about Ashton Brandon? Go ask him yourself. I'm done being a pawn in other people's games. She stood to leave, and Victor grabbed her wrist, hard enough to bruise. Sit down. The old Belinda, the one who'd lived in fear and desperation, would have obeyed. Would have made herself small and compliant because that's how you survived when you had no power. But she wasn't that Belinda anymore. Ashton had taught her something valuable, even through his manipulation. That audacity wasn't just about walking into rooms you didn't belong in. It was about refusing to leave spaces you'd earned the right to occupy, including her own sense of worth. Let go of me, she said, her voice carrying across the coffee shop, drawing attention. Or I start screaming about the gun I can see under your jacket, and we find out how much attention you can afford. Victor's eyes narrowed, but he released her wrist. Belinda walked out, her heart hammering, and pulled out the phone Ashton had given her, the one she'd sworn not to use. She stared at it for a long moment. Pride warred with pragmatism. Anger wrestled with the uncomfortable truth that she'd fallen for the man beneath the manipulation. Ashton had lied to her, used her, orchestrated her desperation. But he'd also seen her, valued her, taught her that she was strong enough to stand in places she'd thought were forever beyond her reach. And he'd been right about one thing. She never would have chosen him if he hadn't manufactured the circumstances. Because the girl she'd been before, terrified, desperate, convinced of her own inadequacy, would never have believed someone like Ashton Brandon could want her for anything more than utility. But he'd shown her she was more. And in doing so, he'd transformed her into someone who could choose him freely, if she wanted to. Belinda took a breath and made her choice. Not the desperate girl's choice. Not the manipulated victim's choice. Her own. She dialed. Ashton answered on the first ring. Belinda. Just her name, but she heard everything in it. Relief, fear, desperate hope. Victor made contact, she said. Coffee shop on 5th and Madison. He threatened my mother. I know. I have people watching you. They're moving in now to secure. I don't want your protection, she interrupted. I want a partnership. Silence. I'm coming back, Belinda continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. But not as your possession. Not as some manipulated piece on your chessboard. As your equal. You want my loyalty? You want me in your world? Then treat me like a partner, not a pet. Give me real information, real choices, real power. Or I walk, and I take my chances with Victor and anyone else who comes for me. More silence. Then, you'd risk your life on principle? You taught me that audacity changes everything. That walking into spaces I'm unqualified for is how I find where I truly belong. She smiled despite everything. So here I am, Ashton Brandon, audaciously demanding a seat at your table instead of just warming your bed. What's your answer? The pause felt eternal. Come home, Ashton said finally, and his voice was rough with emotion. Come home, and we'll negotiate terms. As equals. I'm not forgiving you, Belinda warned. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to choose me anyway. Despite my manipulation. Despite the lies. Choose me because you see who I really am and decide I'm worth the risk. Belinda closed her eyes. I'll be there in an hour. I'll be waiting. She hung up and stared at her reflection in the coffee shop window. No longer the desperate girl in a borrowed dress, but someone else entirely. Someone who'd learned that true power wasn't about money or manipulation. It was about choosing your own path, even when every path led through fire. Ashton was waiting in the penthouse when Belinda arrived, and the relief on his face when she walked through the door was almost painful to witness. You came back, he said, like he'd doubted she would. I said I would. Belinda set down her bag. Now we talk. Really talk. No more manipulation. No more games. They sat across from each other, not as captor and captive, not as boss and employee, but as two people trying to find their way through complicated truths. I was wrong, Ashton said first. Not wrong to want you, but wrong in how I went about it. I told myself I was creating opportunity, but the truth is I was controlling the outcome because control is all I know. And in doing so, I almost destroyed the only real thing I've had in years. Why me? Belinda asked. Really? Why go through all that manipulation for someone like me? Because you reminded me what it felt like to want something I couldn't simply buy or take. His eyes met hers. Everyone in my world wants me for my power, my money, my connections. But you didn't even know who I was when I approached you. You saw a man offering help, and you were brave enough to take it despite your fear. That authenticity is rarer than any treasure I could acquire. Belinda processed this. So what now? I can't pretend the manipulation didn't happen. But I also can't pretend I don't. She stopped, unable to finish. Love me? Ashton supplied quietly. Because I love you, Belinda. Not the version I tried to create. The real you, stubborn, fierce, courageous even when you're terrified. You walked away from security rather than compromise your principles. Do you know how rare that is? I walked away because you broke my trust. I know. And I'll spend however long it takes earning it back. He reached across the space between them, palm up. An invitation, not a command. Stay with me. Not as my possession. As my partner. Teach me how to love someone without trying to control them. I'll teach you that you were always powerful enough to stand anywhere. You just needed someone to believe it first. Belinda looked at his offered hand, remembering the first time she'd taken it at the party. Then, she'd been desperate and afraid. Now she was choosing from strength. She placed her hand in his, and his fingers closed around hers, warm, protective, but no longer possessive. Equal partnership, she said firmly. I want to know about your business. I want a voice in decisions. I want access to resources so I can build something of my own. Done. And if I ever feel controlled or manipulated again, I walk. No contracts, no threats, no consequences except losing me. Understood. Ashton pulled her closer, until she was standing between his knees. Anything else? Yes. Belinda cupped his face, feeling the rough stubble under her palms. Be honest with me. Always. Even when the truth is ugly or difficult or makes you vulnerable. I'd rather have hard truths than comfortable lies. I can do that. His hands settled on her waist. Can I kiss you now? Because I've been dying to since you walked through that door. Belinda smiled, the first genuine smile since finding those files. You have to ask? Equal partnership means enthusiastic consent, Ashton said seriously. So yes, I'm asking. Then yes. Kiss me. Love me. But as your equal, Ashton Brandon. Never as your possession. The kiss was different this time. Not tentative or exploratory, but claiming and claiming back simultaneously. A negotiation conducted in touches and sighs, and the perfect fit of two people who'd found each other through manipulation but were choosing to stay through love. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ashton pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you, he murmured. For being brave enough to come back. For choosing me despite everything. Thank you for teaching me I was always powerful enough to make that choice. Belinda kissed him softly. Now teach me how to run an empire. I have plans. His laugh was genuine, delighted. Of course you do. 3 months later. The charity gala was the same type of event where they'd first met, but everything was different now. Belinda walked in wearing a dress she'd chosen herself. Deep burgundy that made her feel powerful and elegant without trying to be someone she wasn't. Ashton was at her side, but this time, she wasn't clinging to his arm for support. They walked together, partners in every sense. Belinda Clark, Councilman Peters approached with a smile. I heard you've started a consulting firm. Helping small businesses navigate elite networking. Brilliant concept. Thank you, Belinda said confidently. We've already placed 15 clients in positions they never thought they could access. Turns out, when you teach people the language of power instead of gatekeeping it, Amazing things happen. Ashton's hand found the small of her back. Not possessive, just connected. As they moved through the crowd, Belinda caught their reflection in the mirrors again. The image still looked perfect, the powerful man and the elegant woman. But now the image matched the truth. She belonged here. Not because Ashton had manipulated her into belonging, but because she'd fought for her place and claimed it on her own terms. "What are you thinking?" Ashton murmured in her ear. "That I walked into my first party wearing borrowed courage," Belinda said, turning to face him. "But I'm walking through this one wearing my own. And it fits perfectly." His smile was proud and loving and real. "You never needed to borrow anything, Belinda. You were always this powerful. You just needed to believe it." "No," she corrected, kissing him softly. "I needed to be audacious enough to discover it. The rest was always mine." Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is walk into a room you don't belong in and act like you own it. Because here's what happens when you're that audacious. You discover that the only thing keeping you out was your own belief that you didn't deserve to be there. Belinda learned that wearing borrowed dresses and borrowed courage could open doors, but keeping them open required claiming her own power. Ashton learned that you can't truly possess someone worth having. You can only earn the privilege of standing beside them. Their story started with manipulation and desperation. But it became something else entirely. A love built on mutual respect, hard-won trust, and the understanding that true partnership means choosing each other every single day. Not because you have to. Because you want to. Because you're brave enough to be vulnerable with someone who sees all of you, the broken parts and the powerful parts, and loves you not despite them, but because of them. What would you do if you could stand anywhere? If audacity was the only requirement for the life you want? Drop your answer in the comments below. Your story matters. So here's your reminder. Walk into those rooms. Wear your courage like armor. Be audacious enough to claim spaces that weren't built for you. Because on the other side of that fear, that's where you find out who you really are. And who you're capable of becoming.